look back in hindsight, everything is 2020. In hindsight, we make mistakes, we're learning from it. In hindsight, be yesterday and your tomorrow. In hindsight, is so much clearer now.
Hey, welcome to Hindsight, the podcast. I'm your host, Lee Jones. And, this episode is a really good episode for me. Are you feeling a little bit stressed? All right. Are you feeling a little bit tense? Because if you are, I know a guy. And today with me, I have, and let me pull out my little read along. Professor Pete Alexander is the president of the greatest interior landscaping company in the San Francisco Bay Area. Office Plants by Everything Grows. In addition, he serves as an adjunct college professor where he helps inspire students to develop and apply key concepts of marketing specifically to their area of interest. He's also a TEDx speaker and a best-selling author on reducing stress in everyday life. Lastly, but certainly not least, he is a certified laughter yoga leader and improv comedy cast member supporting his community to laugh more and stress less. Hey, how you doing? So let's start this off really quick. Do I call you Professor Pete? Do I call you Professor Alexander? Pete? Mr. Alexander? What do you prefer?
Let's go with Professor Pete Lee. And thank you so much for having me on your great show. And I really appreciate your listeners' time as well.
Absolutely. I'm really looking forward to having you on the call, on the show, because I really want to learn some things about stress too. It seems like stress is everywhere, right? Turn on the news, it's stressful. You go to work, it's stressful. You go home and deal with your pets, it's stressful, right? So just having you on this episode is just monumental for me. And I know it will be for the listeners as well. So I'm putting a lot of pressure on you.
Okay. Hopefully I can deliver.
Absolutely. Hey, so where are you calling in from?
I'm calling in from the Seattle area. I like to call it the greater Seattle area because I'm actually close to the Olympic National Park that would be west of Seattle, and absolutely love it here because hiking is one of my favorite pastimes, and I've been here for 5 years and just touching the surface of some of the trails that are amazing up here.
Have you ever gone and forgive my lack of geography, have you ever gone up on Mount Rainier?
I have. I haven't summited it. That's actually, interestingly enough, one of my bucket list items that I have set for a goal for this year. But I have climbed on Mount Rainier, but just up roughly a couple thousand feet. And it's a 14,000 foot mountain.
That's enough. I'll tell you what. I was in the Army for 26 years, and I'll put that out there. But while I was in the Army, we had some units that were in Seattle. So they were at Joint Base. They changed the names. Lewis McChord, right. And every time I would land in San Jose, and I would drive all the way there. It's just like a long drive to get to the base, right? And I always, flying in, I would always see Mount Rainier kind of just majestically just poking through the clouds. It was crazy, just beautiful, right? And I always wanted to go there, but I never wanted to invest the time, right? I wanted to either get from the airport to McChord or from McChord back to the airport. So I'm envious of you in that part.
Yeah, and that's something that, everybody who gets to fly into Seattle gets to see because it's hard to miss, especially unless it's a rainy day, which wow, what a surprise. It does rain here in Seattle. But what's interesting, too, is I moved up here 5 years ago from the San Francisco Bay Area. And the interesting thing is when my first hike with a group, I had it, a week or so after I moved up here. And I was emailing the hiking leader. And he said, okay, we're going to meet at this place and, we'll carpool to the trailhead. And then I said, well, unless it's pouring rain, like I was looking at the forecast and the forecast was calling for really just pummeling rain. And he replies back to me, I kid you not. He replies back to me, did you just move from California? And it's like, because it's true. Anytime it was raining in California, very few hikes took place. But in up here, it's
Yeah,
just, you know what? The rain, you just deal with it.
right. I was gonna say it. Doesn't it rain a lot in that
hmm
area, Seattle
hmm
area?
It
But
does.
not pummeling rain. It's just
No,
like a misty type. Yeah.
misty, kind of, sadly, a lot of times we call it dreary. What's nice about where I live is that it's actually a third less rain and a third more sunshine than it is in
Oh,
Seattle. So I
okay.
was actually very, very pleasantly surprised when I moved up here.
Hmm.
How much sun I get. So it's really nice. But I also really appreciate having the water because,
Mm.
up until this last, couple of years, California was so dry to the bone. So, I definitely can appreciate having the moisture.
Oh, I'm from the East Coast. I'm in
Ah.
California now, and I tell you what, you made a good point, right? It's raining right now,
hmm
right here in Cali. Pretty bad too. Some people are going through it, and for us, where we're living at, it's not too bad, thankfully. But I just remember going home to Maryland. That's where I'm from, and
hmm
when you fly in, it's like you put on the HD or the 4K glasses, right? Because now everything is so much brighter and the
Of
colors are
course.
so much colorful, right?
Of
And when you
course.
fly into California, it's plants and stuff. Well, Southern
hmm
California, they're plants, but it's so ugh dreary.
Yeah.
It's like you went back a little bit. I don't
Yeah.
know if you've experienced that or not.
I
Probably
have.
the same type of thing going from Seattle to California.
Yeah, yeah, it is. What's interesting is that when I come back to California, I
Hmm.
notice it more and more, especially in the summertime, how much drier the ground was than I even
Mm,
realized back when I was doing my regular hikes. I mean, I just kind of
right.
took it for granted, but now I see it and I go, wow, this is, even in the couple of places that I would go that I knew it was going to be a nice, more, you know, climate friendly area.
Right. Right.
And even that is so dry. It's
Mm,
just it's amazing. And when the rains start coming down in buckets, then all of a sudden you
mm,
get the landslides as well because what's sadly happening in California with this climate change is the fact that the we're getting more and more fires, and the fire season is going longer and longer.
yeah.
And then when those trees get burned down, guess what?
Come the
Then
rain.
the rains come, and
It
there's
goes to
nothing to
mud.
hold
Hmm.
those landslides from happening. So
Yeah.
it's really there's not a clear answer to it, unfortunately, other than have to do something to help the planet. And what's interesting is during COVID,
Hmm.
I'm not sure if you saw this, but when back in March of 2020, when the pretty much business for the most part came to a halt, it was interesting because the planet started repairing itself. So, it's
Mm,
really interesting. So it can be fixed. And, not shutting business down isn't the answer. But if you can do business with a little
yeah.
bit more of a thought to what is it doing to the planet, that could really
Right.
be the change that we need that can stop the planet from deteriorating further.
Interesting point.
hmm
Interesting. That's interesting. Um, I know I won't make that joke, but I was gonna
It's
say
okay.
I know driving was a lot better at the time.
Oh
Um,
yeah, yeah.
but but so you kind of alluded to in some of the stuff that I was reading about how work itself is stressful
hmm
and
hmm
it took its toll on you,
Yes.
right? So let's go through that a little bit. Let's understand, like, what were some of the jobs that you did, and can you explain some of the stress that just kind of broke you down?
Sure, sure. So, for context, I mean, Stress and I have had a lifelong relationship with each other.
Everyone.
Yeah, and those of us who grew up in a very dysfunctional family background,
okay.
So we take on different roles to try and cope. My role that I took on was the hero role because none of my family went to college, and so my idea of trying to survive all this major dysfunction was to try and get out and be able to do something where I could be able to leave. And the problem, though, was that I didn't learn how to deal with the stress. I put it aside. And I did not deal with it. And then when I started my career, and I spent most of my career in the medical device industry, which is very stressful for several reasons. One, most of the companies that I worked for, they were publicly traded. And again, medical device. So we had, and I was working in the marketing department. And the problem is that you've got a two-edged sword in regulatory with, basically you have to, as a publicly traded stock, you have to, make sure that you're not making any false promises. But then also when you're talking about the approvals that, you get from different regulatory organizations, that is, and they can fine tooth comb anything that you have. And so it was a double whammy. We had to go through all these hoops to make sure that everything we said was exactly to the T perfect. And so that caused a lot of pressure, and also having to deliver every quarter, because publicly traded company, so you have to hit your numbers. And what happened was, initially, when we are stressed, especially in our careers, there's several things that our bodies do that give us early warning signs. One of the most common ones is back and shoulder stiffness. And that happens because those of us who work at a desk throughout the day, when we're stressed, we tend to hunch over at our desks. And that puts a lot of pressure on our shoulders and our back. Well, and there's many other ones. It could be things like where you're getting excessive or not enough sleep. You could be having stomach issues where no amount of Pepto-Bismol is helping you, or you're reaching for the Excedrin bottle every day instead of occasionally because of your headaches. And then for me, what happened was I had this perfect storm of stressful activities back in 2008. My dad was dying and he needed his affairs taken care of. My mom, the two of them were divorced, but she had to have major surgery and her insurance didn't cover for the proper physical therapy, so she needed help. I was running my landscaping business with several employees, and the employees needed my attention. My kids were young at that time, and they wanted my attention. And, oh, by the way, my marriage was heading for a divorce. So, all these things were on my shoulders. And I kept ignoring these things. And then all of a sudden, I lost 30 pounds in 30 days. And at first, I was thinking, wow, this is fantastic, because I was in my mid-40s and I hadn't lost weight since my early 20s. So it was like, wow, it's coming off. And I was eating my regular food and, junk food and stuff like that. And, and they just kept on coming off and thinking, wow, this is awesome. And then after that 30th pound came off, I thought, I better have this checked out. And sure enough, blood work came back and they told me I had stress-induced diabetes. And what's interesting is that nobody in my family had diabetes. So, and I exercised regularly and I kept very active. But classic, what I ended up doing, instead of really dealing with that at that point, I just said, okay, come on, give me whatever drug I need. And I don't have time to mess around with this. I got to keep moving. So I continued to burn the candle at both ends for another 10 years. And then what ended up happening is I ended up in the emergency room 1 hour from being comatose with a severe case of diabetic ketoacidosis.
Wow.
And for your listeners who
I'm
don't
about to say, what is that?
Yeah. So basically, in layman's terms, my body was eating itself alive because of my stress.
Mm-hmm.
And my blood sugars were off the charts. And the reason what happened was I had gone back to corporate, and I had a micromanager for a boss. And, when you have a micromanager, basically that person's a micromanager because they don't trust their employees. And I was getting micromanaged on this very high profile project. And get this. So when I was first admitted to the hospital, my blood sugars were so high, the medical grade glucometers could not read it. They just said high. And so the lab had to manually estimate, and they estimated my blood sugars to be 8 to 10 times higher than normal. And that's why the doctor said, you were about an hour away from being comatose.
Right.
And so they transferred me to the ICU. And on my second day in ICU, around 6 a.m., and, I was getting poked and prodded every half an hour to an hour. You don't sleep in the hospital. You just don't. And they were poking me to check my blood. And so at about 6 a.m. roughly, I get a text from my micromanager boss. And that person says, you have a webinar you need to run at 8 o'clock. What are you going to do about it? And what a surprise. I did not have my work laptop there in the ICU.
Right.
So in ICU, I had my phone. And so I'm going, oh my gosh. And so I'm sitting there trying to reschedule that webinar on my phone, pushing the envelope on what this phone can do. And the nurse who was caring for me at that point comes over to me, checks my blood, and my blood sugars had come down to a more reasonable level. At least the glucometers could read it.
Okay.
But it was still high, but they could read it. And all of a sudden, as I'm sitting there on my phone trying to reschedule this webinar, like a 90-degree angle, my blood sugars skyrocket back up. And this nurse says to me, pretty much a complete stranger, she says to me, you realize that's what put you in this hospital bed in the first place. And even though my family members and my close friends had all told me the same thing, it wasn't until I heard that from a complete stranger who had no, reason, no stake in the game to tell me. And I'm thinking, oh my gosh, I am trading my health for my career. And that is a really bad trade. So I ended up spending the next couple of days in the hospital really pondering that.
Okay.
And after I got out of the hospital, I decided, you know what, I have no choice. I have to focus on my health, because if I don't, I might not be around to meet my future grandchildren.
Right.
And so I decided to, I actually resigned to my boss's boss, who is the person who hired me. And then that person hired the micromanager. And I started focusing on my health. And not only did I notice that my stress went down, my blood sugars as a diabetic went down, my weight went down, and my energy went way up. It was as if I had discovered the fountain of youth. And what's really crazy, Lee, is you see me today, but if you were to see me, pictures of me from 14 years ago when I was first diagnosed with stress-induced diabetes, other than a little more gray hair, I actually look younger today than I did 14 years ago. And that's crazy. That's what stress does to us. And the other interesting thing too is that, you know, I've some doctors, they'll say, well, actually, that stress doesn't directly cause diabetes or other chronic diseases like heart disease, cancer, etc. The reality is, what happens is when we're constantly stressing ourselves out from negative stress, which I'll clarify in a moment, what ends up happening is it causes a cellular inflammation. And when we have cellular inflammation, chronic disease can occur if it is not addressed. And what, if you think about it, our bodies are pretty much the same bodies from the Stone Age. And, when we were, back in the Stone Age, the stress that we were dealing with was, dealing with a T-Rex or a saber-toothed tiger or something. It was a short-term thing. And we would be dropping cortisol and adrenaline into our bodies to deal with that short-term thing. But nowadays, most of our stress is mental. And we're constantly dumping that cortisol, that adrenaline, other hormones into our bodies. And our bodies are not designed to have to deal with that constantly. So our bodies start raising the bar and giving us early warning signs like we discussed earlier. And then it has to keep on raising the bar. And in my case, the weakest link in my body's chain at that point was my pancreas. And that's why I ended up with the diabetes. And it's just, it's something where I now have to deal with this for the rest of my life. It's a chronic disease.
So you said that you resigned from your boss's boss. When you say you resigned, you mean you left the company?
Correct.
So for, a lot of us deal with stress, especially at work, micromanagers, different types of leadership styles, right? Not explaining expectations and then getting, criticized, ostracized, whatever the words you want to use when you don't meet undefined expectations. So anyway, bottom line is everyone doesn't have the opportunity to resign or to leave, right? And everyone hasn't gotten to that almost comatose state as well. So from your perspective, what are some and we got some more to your story to talk about, right? And we'll keep it going. But in this space, what are some strategies or some things that you can do and still operate in that space, right, to relieve some of that stress?
Yeah, it's a great question. So probably the first and the foremost you mentioned about clarifying expectations. Yeah. So, when your boss, supervisor gives you an assignment, a project, whatever it happens to be, make sure you're absolutely clear on what those deliverables are and when they have to be delivered. The reason is because if you, and I always recommend, especially if you don't have a great relationship with your supervisor, get it in writing. Just an email. Hey, I just want to clarify,
cover your butt.
I'm going to do this. Exactly. I'm going to do this, this, and this. By clarifying that up front, then there's no surprises, or it minimizes the surprises. That's the critical thing. Too often we assume we understand it.
Yeah.
And the problem is that each of us has our own perception of how we understood it. So if you can get it clarified, that can be a big, big benefit to helping reduce your stress. A second one is setting proper boundaries. And what I mean by that is, your boss is going to, give you work. And more often than not, they're going to give you more work than you can actually handle, right? So it happens to us. So what a great way of dealing with this, instead of saying, I can't do this, what you can do, or spending, all of your waking hours trying to catch up. When you get an assignment and another one, because the plate is getting fuller and fuller, What you can do is ask your supervisor, so that person has just given you another assignment. You could say, okay, if I'm going to focus on this one, here's these other things that I have on my list. I can't do all of them. Please select which ones are going to get backburned, are going to be delayed, whatever. You just choose that for me. That way, your boss actually understands, okay, I can't humanly expect this person to do all of these things. I'll find somebody else to do it, delegate, or I'll do it myself or something. That, again, goes back to, confronting that right up front. Because, and if you let your boss make that decision, then the onus is on them if there's something else that doesn't get done on time.
Absolutely.
So that's another one. Another that I think is really, really important is to, I like to call it sandbag. And what I mean by that is whenever you're assigned a new project, some sort of work, and your boss says, okay, when can I expect it? Okay. So let's say you take a look at that and you estimate that it's going to take you a week. All right.
Right.
Tell them 2 weeks. Okay.
I like it. Yeah. Yeah.
And the reason being is because it is way easier to have a conversation with your supervisor why you brought it in early or under budget, so tell them it's going to cost more than it actually is, whatever the situation is. Sandbag it by telling it's going to cost more or it's going to take longer, and then you deliver it at a shorter time and at less cost, because it's way easier to have a conversation with your supervisor about why you might have sandbagged versus trying to, have that conversation about why it's going to come in late or why it's over budget. So that's a much harder one.
Great strategy. I know when I ask my team for things, and I give that actual question. So when can I expect this from you? Right. And sometimes they give answers that I think are too aggressive. Like, I'll get it to you tomorrow. Okay, well, how about you make sure I have it by next Tuesday? Right. I put the buffer in for them, right? Understanding, and all bosses aren't like that, right? But understanding that there are other things that they're committed to do as well. And I'm not telling you to bump this to the highest priority. I'm just saying I need it done, right? So for bosses that aren't like that, you really have to advocate for yourself, right? You really have to put the onus on your boss. So I appreciate that. That's a good.
Yeah, and it's a good point too that you mentioned about being from the boss's perspective too.
Yeah.
Is, see, you're an enlightened boss that knows, okay, this employee is being too aggressive with this, and you want, I'm sure you're similar to me, that you want quality work. You don't want half-assed work, right? So, so it's kind of like, so you've got the experience that, somebody who's working for you may not have. And so, letting them have a little bit more time and kind of educating them on, okay, this is probably going to take longer, or, I want to make sure it's done with all the, everything that needs to be done from a detailed perspective. And that just goes back to clarifying expectations.
Absolutely.
And it's just, it really is. And that once you do that, the rapport that you're going to have with your employees is going to be higher. And interestingly enough, I co-authored a book back in 2000 during the .com boom and then the crash that happened after that. But at the time that the .com boom was happening, so many of those technical professionals, companies were having such a hard time recruiting and retaining those people. And so what was interesting in the research that was done, the number one reason, if they were honest, the number one reason people were leaving a company was not because they were being offered a bunch more money somewhere else. It was the poor relationship with their manager.
Yeah.
And so when you can build rapport with your employees, and one of the things that I always looked at with my employees is, okay, I want to help them further their careers. And so whether that is, at a corporate level was, looking at maybe replacing me at some point, or looking for a job outside of the company that would be a better fit for them in the future. I wanted to help them with that. And that's because while I had that employee, I wanted that employee motivated. And the reality is that the person is going to be motivated if they see a future for themselves.
Right.
And so, that was one of the things that I wanted to do. And, I worked for some people, micromanagers, et cetera, who had this paranoia that, Pete's going to take my job, or, Pete's going to be a better, is going to outshine me, or whatever it happens to be. And it's like, that's so short-sighted. And so you really, that's what a supervisor or a manager really should be, is growing the people that report to them.
Absolutely. All right, so let's go back a little bit to your near comatose time. How do you know, and you didn't know, so I don't even know if you can answer this question, but how do you know when enough is enough? Right? How do you know when I need to go do something different, right? From your perspective. And maybe, from a stress level at work, whatever it is. And then I'm just trying to think, because your body gives you a lot of signs, right? You express some of them. When I guess I'll leave it at that. When do you think enough is enough? Like when your body starts giving you triggers, when you start having headaches, just from your professional experience.
Yeah, for me, obviously, even with all the different scenarios that were happening to me, I still ended up having to be in the hospital. And so you don't want to be an hour before being comatose, obviously.
Right.
But what happens is that when you have multiple things happening to you on, let's say, a daily basis, that is a clear sign that you need to reevaluate what's going on. And, what we talked about the physical things, but you can also have, the mental indicators that will happen as well. So, it might be the fact that you can't focus. You used to be able to focus, and now you can't, because, you've got too many distractions with what's going on. Another one might be anxiety. Tons of anxiety. And the reality is the anxiety almost always is we have a fear of something either happening or might not happen in the future, and we're worried about that. During the research that I did for the stress book, I found that there's really only two types of stress that we really have to focus on to try and minimize. One of them is ruminating about the past. So a classic example of this, we either have guilt because of something we either did or didn't do in the past.
Right.
Well, the reality is it's in the past. We can't change that. However, we can learn from the past, the positive learnings, and apply those and let go of the past. So if we can do that, that's a huge one.
Right.
And then anxiety about something in the future, something that may or may not happen, but that we're totally worried about. And a great technique to be able to manage that better is instead, let's say, a lot of people are afraid that a difficult conversation with someone, maybe a boss or an employee that you don't think is going to go well. Okay. So instead of imagining that conversation is going to go awful, instead, imagine 5 seconds after that conversation is done. And what you imagine is with that person, you are either shaking hands, you're hugging, they're smiling, whatever it happens to be. Because what we want to do is we want to set the proper energy for that.
Okay.
And when we're continuously worried about something that's going to happen in the future, we're sending out negative energy. And what ends up happening is when we send out negative energy, we attract back negative energy. That's why we want to send out positive energy, because we're going to attract back positive energy. And if, for those listeners who may not believe this, think this is too woo-woo, think about the last time you were running late for an appointment that you really needed to be there on time. And you start stressing about it. And what ends up happening? Every red light, right? Every red light happens.
Yeah, that's funny.
It is. It is. And the reason is because, and this might be a little bit woo-woo, but, if you believe in the universe giving you what you request, the universe doesn't know positive from negative. It only knows what you're asking. And so if you're saying, not another red light, the universe says, oh, you want another red light? It happens. So I tend to, whenever I get a green light or there's a bridge nearby me that can open and close for boats passing by, and if it's closed, it's going to be an hour delay and stuff like that. So every time I go over that bridge and it's open or I get a green light, I think to myself, thank you, thank you, thank you. Because what I'm doing is I'm saying, I want more of that.
Right. Okay.
So, yeah.
That's a good, if nothing else, a good mental strategy. I'll tell you what, I'm laughing a little bit because I just had that experience yesterday. We have it every day if you're driving, right? But I just had that experience the other day. I needed to plug something in the GPS, but I had already started driving. And you can't really do it while you're driving.
No.
So I was like, okay, at the next red light, I'll put it in park and I'll plug it in, right? Lo and behold, you get to the red light, automatically just turns green. Next one turns green. There's no stopping. And it's just like, I just need to stop for a moment, right? So it does the reverse. It's kind of funny, right? And then when you're in a hurry, absolutely, you will catch everyone. And if you just take a moment, and just be like, you know what? I'm good. I'm good. It usually works out. So that is funny. That just happened yesterday. And it probably happens every day, but
it does.
It specifically happened yesterday.
Exactly. If you stay in the present, you'll notice that too. That's, it really happens because, kind of going back to the ruminating about the past and anxiety about the future, the problem is that takes us away from the present. And,
absolutely.
And really, we're alive today. It's a gift. It's a gift.
Right.
That's why they call it the present, right?
It's the present.
So let's try and stay present as much as possible. And, I get it that there's a lot of things that come and hit us from, all different, areas. But even if it's just something like, noticing, oh, wow, the sunrise is beautiful today. Or, wow, that flower is got this striking color. Or, hey, you know what? I don't see smog in the air today. Something like that. I just taking a moment to acknowledge that keeps you in the present.
So how long did it take you to get yourself better? You said you took you resigned, you took some time to focus on your health. And that just real quick answer, because then I want to segue into your book, all right, and the research. But about how long did that take?
Yeah, it took, so people, might think, oh, well, yeah, you quit your job, so of course the stress went down. Well, not necessarily because I didn't have that job. I still had to bring in income. So, I was able to go through the financial aspect of it more than anything else. But once I started focusing on my health after I got out of the hospital, before I started seeing true results, it was about 3 to 4 weeks. It really was.
Okay, well, that's good.
And the reason is I'm a type A personality, so I'm frequently go, and I I want to see results. If someone's a little bit more relaxed about that, then it probably would happen even faster. And it's interesting too. You don't have to do a drastic change to make a difference. What I've found is that all it takes is a minute or two of focused stress relief work. And if you do that on a daily basis, what happens is the compound benefits over time are enormous. If it becomes a habit for you, then it's going to make that big difference. And what I did, as a type A personality, my calendar is what happens during the day, right? So it's like, for example, our conversation was right there in my calendar. Nothing else is going to distract me from that. So what I started doing is booking an appointment for myself in my calendar every day. And I did a couple activities just so that I could ground myself. And that makes a difference. And now it's a habit forming. So there's several things that I do that are habits. And one that isn't in the calendar, but my wife and I do right before we go to bed, is we have a gratitude exercise. And either she asks me or I ask her, what are you grateful for today? And it's not about, I'm grateful, for something expensive, let's say. It's the little things. But I always start mine off with, I'm grateful for my health, because all else is secondary. I learned that the hard way.
You did.
And the thing is that when, I had a few people who said, well, yeah, but, I'm young, I'll deal with the health thing, later. Well, what I ask them is, have you ever had a really bad flu or cold, something like that, where all you wanted to do was lie in bed?
Yeah.
And if you can think about a time like that, then I ask, did you have any energy for your job, for your business, for your loved ones? And if they're honest, they're going to say no. So the reality is, what good are you to your job, to your career, to your loved ones, if all you can do is lie in bed? Your health is paramount. So definitely focus on that.
Oh man, I try to equate it to, you said you were type A and you're like, go, 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 go. And, being in California, you see these aggressive drivers, right? So you're in a hurry. You're always in a hurry to get somewhere, right? That you don't really need to be in a hurry to get to. Sometimes legit, but a lot of times you're just aggressive. So what happens when you get in that accident, right? You got to slow down. What happens when the cops pull you over? You got to slow down. You have to slow down, right? So the point is, from my perspective at looking at this, it's all about perspective. You don't need to speed towards everything, right? You need to figure out what those priorities are, what really makes, what are really important to you, and what's going to make an impact, a positive impact in your life, right? Going forward, whatever that trajectory is that you're trying to get to. And sometimes you just got to slow down. And sometimes you got to look out the window and enjoy the ride, right? Enjoy the scenery and not just focus on, what's going to happen in the future, to your point. Can I enjoy this moment right now? I had to work, and it's not that far. It's like 34 miles. So I had to drive to work. This is why I kind of appreciate, and I talked about the drive-in during COVID. It would take me an hour and a half, 2 hours. So like an hour and a half to get to work and then 2 hours to get back, just because of traffic. And it used to be so frustrating, right? But then after a while, you become one with it. And I started looking at the mountains, because it's beautiful on the I-15, just driving through, looking at the mountains, looking at the cloud structures and stuff like that, right? So just understanding that everything doesn't have to be so aggressive. It doesn't have to be, I have to get this done right now, right? It really doesn't have to. And putting a priority or premium on your health is going to make you have more memories, more pleasant memories, a more pleasant lifestyle, right? So that's just me just thinking out loud. Now you tell me the truth. because you wrote a book, and it is called, let's see, Lighten Your Day.
Lighten Your Day.
Fast, easy, and effective stress relief. Now
That's
oh, you
exactly
got it
right.
up on the screen. Okay.
Yep.
You want to make sure I read the words right. Yeah. So tell me what motivated you to write the book, and then follow that up with some of the research. You mentioned some research that you did for the book. Just explain that process for me. Thanks.
Sure. So the reason I wrote it was because my friends and former coworkers saw after 3-4 weeks, I was communicating with them, and they were saying, "Oh my gosh, you are looking so much better." And and I said, "Yeah, I'm doing this, I'm doing that." And they said, "You ought to write a book about this." So I thought to myself, no, you know what? I'll talk about the different techniques that I tried. And literally, I tried over 100 of them. And so the book is primarily focused on those ideas, and 95% of them are ones that can be done in 5 minutes or less. And the reason why I organized it like that is because when I did my research on what other stress books were out there, the vast majority of them were books that basically focused on like one thing. So deep breathing or yoga or meditation or something. Those are all great techniques. But the reality was most of the people that I had come across, as well as myself, didn't have the time to read a 300-page book on one activity.
Ain't that something?
The reality is we got 5 minutes to try something, and hopefully it'll work. And so that's what the intent of the book is. Try something. If it works, great, run with it. If it doesn't, big deal. 5 minutes or less is all you spent. You can try another one next time. So, it's the reality is like, Lee, something might work for you that may not work for me, and vice versa. So It's having the options. And what I did was I organized those in terms of the 7 areas of our lives that give us the most stress. And that's where the research took me. And basically that is where the lighten word comes from. And so L is your livelihood or your career. I is your imagination. And basically the reason why that one is so important is it's basically your inner critic. Your inner critic imagines, oh, this is going to be awful or whatever it happens to be. So you need to be able to. Exactly. And the crazy thing is, it's only 5% of our brain, but it has so much control over us.
It speaks so loudly, though.
Exactly. So the G is our genius. That's our unconscious mind. That's where our habits are formed. That's where our perceptions of the world lie. That's where our deep-rooted memories are. So that is where the real magic can happen. And then T is time, because second to health, time is of utmost importance. So we've got to manage our time properly and be in the moment as much as possible. E is our environment. So T. Oh, yeah. I skipped over H. I apologize. So after genius is health, our physical health that I talked about, and then T is the time, and then E is our environment. Whether it's at home, whether it's at work, we have to make sure that our environment is conducive to our stress relief efforts. And then N is our network of relationships, both our family and our professional lives, our friends, because we want to be around people who will support us and not be around toxic individuals. So, those 7 areas are the ones that if you can get those as much in balance as possible, it will make a huge difference for you. And the reality is as we go through our lives, we're not going to have them in perfect balance all the time. There's going to be 1 or 2 that are out of balance, but those techniques will help you get it back into balance. And basically, you just want to make sure, when you look back and you say, okay, how did my last year go? Do your own self-evaluation. and see. And if you need to, if you continue to have an area of your life that is something that is still giving you trouble and stuff, then it's a matter of focusing on that even more. But if, it doesn't take a lot to make a huge difference. I'm telling you, I did it. And, I've got a lot of people that I've given some coaching to that have experienced the same thing. And it doesn't take a huge amount of effort. It just takes persistence in doing it.
So those strategies that you provide in your book, do they help like with health and time, or do they hit all of them at once? Right. So
it's a great question. So when you look in the particular chapters, the techniques that are in that particular chapter are focused on that area of your life, but they can be used in other areas as well. So it's just that, instead of just a huge laundry list of over 100 techniques, it's like, okay, if you're having trouble with time, let's say, here are 10 ideas for you, or 12 ideas, 50, basically there. But the other thing that I have several people who, what they do is, when they're looking for an idea, they will flip through the book, just spin through it and stop on a particular page. And they'll go, okay, I'm going to do that one. You can do that as well.
Just work on something different today. I like it.
Yeah.
I like it. I like the cover too, by the way. That's a pretty cool cover.
Thank you.
On the book. Yeah. Go ahead.
Oh no, I was going to say, the funny thing is that it was like, okay, got to show that, the people are kind of like going, oh, this is where I want to go in the middle. But looking at the outside, it's like, okay, that's what we really have when we're dealing with
that's where we're at right now. Exactly. So, I know we're running on time, so I apologize if we go over a little bit. But can you tell me a little bit about your experience with the TEDx talk?
Oh, sure. Well, let's talk about stress there.
I know it always.
So, I got the opportunity to do a TEDx back in October of last year. And believe it or not, part of the stress continues in that they're so backed up right now in approving talks that mine hasn't published yet. So it's like, okay, when is that going to be? I mean, it's been now a little over 3 months. So, normally they said 3 to 4 months, but, from what we understand, it's actually going to be longer than that. But what I did was I got the opportunity. And what I had done was I was applying to different TEDx talks since June of 2021. And what happened was, each time I got rejected, it was kind of like a punch in the gut. It was like, I was taking it personally. And at a certain point, what ended up happening is I said, you know what, I'm going to change. I had gone through 3 different topics and had been rejected roughly 50 times.
Okay.
And so I decided, you know what, I'm going to change the topic, and I'm going to talk about rejection, and I'm going to talk about rejection, about dealing with rejection, and using the fact that I was rejected so many times by TEDx organizers as part of the talk. And so I continued to get rejected, which, hilarious, but my whole mindset changed after I used that topic, because what happened was, each time I got rejected with that topic, I actually said thank you, because the organizer that would reject me was giving me more data on my primary research. And then, lo and behold, the 90th application came in, and it was approved. And during my talk, I talk about 3 ways to overcome rejection, including my all-time favorite, which is laughter. And, as you mentioned, I'm a laughter yoga leader, and it is absolutely amazing. I get to bring laughter to my community as a laughter yoga leader, as well as an improv comedy performer. And it is absolutely amazing what laughter can do to bring people together. It doesn't matter if they speak a different language, if they come from a different culture, if they're a different race, whatever it happens to be. Laughter is this common ground that people can really enjoy. And the thing that is so amazing about laughter yoga, which started back in India in the 1995 by it was established by a Dr. Kataria, and what is the secret sauce to laughter yoga is that you know how you feel great when you have a hearty laugh.
Yeah.
Well, what happens is when we laugh and we have a hearty laugh, or even if it's a giggle, or just smiling intently,
right?
What ends up happening is after about 5 to 6 seconds, our bodies release the positive hormones and the endorphins that feel so great and have huge health benefits. Well, here's the crazy thing. As smart and as intelligent and as, so powerful as our bodies are, they don't know the difference between a real and a simulated laugh. It only knows that you're laughing. So what we do in laughter yoga is we do laughter exercises on things that could be completely ridiculous. We're not sitting there typically telling jokes. We're just doing activities that, we would have laughed at when we were kids, where the typical kid will probably laugh over 100 times a day. But as adults, if we laugh 5 times a day, we're lucky. And so what we're doing is we're doing activities that we do a simulated laugh. And what happens is when you're around other people who are doing a simulated laugh, then the laugh becomes contagious, and then real laugh happens.
And then becomes real.
It does. And so it's so powerful. And it I feel so good. I have taught classes where I had a headache before I walked into class, and my headache's gone. Or
that's beautiful.
I might not have had the full energy before class, but after class, I feel fantastic. And it's just amazing what those positive endorphins can do through laughter.
All right. So I've asked you, I don't know, 3 or 4 or 5 questions. I'm not sure. But right now, is there anything that you want to touch on that we haven't talked about so far?
No, I just, what I would just, try and remind the listeners that don't trade your health for your career. That's a really bad trade. Take care of your health, because if you want more time, which a lot of us do, especially as we get older, health is paramount to gaining more time in this lifetime.
Right. Awesome. Hey, I also we touched on it really quick about what is the name? Office plants by everything grows. Like of all the things to be the president of, right?
Yes.
Are you the president or the owner? So to be the president of that is it makes sense, right? Plants, water, all these calming things, right? And then also the actual chemical, released from the plants that make it, that much more healthy, environment for you in that space. So really, all right, we're really going on, and I'm pushing you. Tell me a little bit about this. Tell me about where we can get the name of the book, where we can get the book, and then where people can find out more information about you or to connect with you.
Sure. Okay, so Office Plants by Everything Grows, it was a company that I purchased back in 2005 after I was working for the second company in a row that got bought by its competitor. And so I wanted to have a little bit more stability by having my own business. And
Gotcha.
the first year that I owned it, I wanted to get rid of it so quickly because it was failing. And luckily I was able to turn it around, and grateful for, other than COVID, March of 2020, it's grown every year. But we're back whole now. I'm very grateful for that. And you're right. having live plants in work environments makes all the difference in the world in terms of helping people stay more calm. And there's university research, lots of it from all over the world, that indicate how powerful live plants, not plastic plants, live plants, what they can do to clean the air and help calm people and also make a more healthy environment. And so it fits really well with what I'm about. And as far as the book and how to find out more and connect with me, probably the best way to do it is just come to my website at petealexander.com, PETEALEXANDER.com.
Awesome. Hey, I really appreciate you, Professor Pete. We started that off earlier, and I never had an opportunity to call your name out.
It's okay. Well, Professor Pete I go by that because I am really a professor. I've got my PhD, and that's what I love my students calling me. And because Pete Alexander is a very common name, or Peter Alexander, so I decided to brand myself as Professor Pete Alexander, because that, at least when somebody does a search, like on LinkedIn, for example, they can find me very easily.
Right. Well, Professor Pete, I really appreciate your time, your tips, your strategies, your story, right, on just properly managing stress, right? And we really do not want to hit rock bottom like you do, especially when it comes with health. So hopefully everyone who was listening was able to take a tip, learn at least one thing, from this episode. I learned a ton, and just apply that. And then don't forget to go out and get the book. Right. He's got, I don't know, what'd you say, 80, hundreds, different strategies that take about 5 minutes out of your day that can help you to be a less stressful person, right, and to maintain that proper health. So thank you so much, Professor Pete. Any final words? You have any final words?
I just want to say thank you for having me on your wonderful show, Lee, and I really appreciate your listeners' time for this episode.
Hey, welcome to Hindsight.
Hi, Lee.
Uh-oh. Hey, how you doing? I already started.
I thought that Riverside allows you to have the green screen background.
I already started recording. How you doing? Oh, you're going to have me doing some research. You're going to have me stressing out.
No, let's see.
I'm just playing. That's just part of it.
I mean, it's so...
Thanks for tuning in to Hindsight, the podcast. I hope you enjoyed this episode. I know I did. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button to stay updated on future episodes packed with inspiring stories. Before you go, leave me a message with your thoughts, feedback, or suggestions for future topics. And if you're loving what you hear, please take a moment to rate this episode. Your feedback helps me to grow and reach more listeners just like you.